Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Peter Liakhov, who is an Armenia-based journalist and documentary filmmaker. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
In one of your pieces during what we call the Velvet Revolution, you said that when you were describing the beginning stages of the events, you said that you sensed some skepticism from the public. What were they skeptical about, and what was the turning point?
Well, I think the skepticism was about whether this revolution could succeed. I mean, people, at least in my conversations with people, no one thought that it was going to be a revolution. You know, there's been protests many times before, and especially when protests challenge state power, they usually didn't succeed. And I mean, this is common to post-Soviet states where, let's say there's an election, it's usually contested, and nothing comes of it. I remember one taxi driver I spoke to, I sort of asked him, as the protests were growing, and I said, you know, this is strange, this is a bit different. Do you think anything's gonna happen? And he said, no way, this is Armenia, nothing ever changes. And then of course, 1 week later, everything changed. And I wonder if even Nikol Pashinyan was surprised, not just by his success, but how quickly it came.
Mm-hmm. And was there a specific event that caused the turning point, you think, in people's minds, that they knew this was, you know, going all in?
I don't know if there was a particular event. I mean, for me, I think something changed on, and I don't remember the exact date, all I remember is that it was a Friday. But basically what happened was when you go into the center, you see that there are no police around, and that the protesters have started basically celebrating. You know, everyone's honking, people are waving flags, and it seems as if the protesters have taken control over central Yerevan. I mean, the government no longer rules there. And when I saw that happening, I realized that this is different, this is big, something's gonna change.
Something's different.
Yeah.
And when we talk about international media, this was one of the most covered events in Armenia's recent history. Why was this important both for the world and for Armenia?
I'll answer the second question first. I think it's important for Armenia for the very obvious reason that the Հանրապետական are no longer in power. I mean, this is...
The Republican Party.
The Republican Party is no longer in power. This is the biggest political transformation in Armenia since independence. As for why it was such a big deal in international news, I think, I mean, revolutions are always kind of big deals, but what's interesting in Armenia is what we're seeing throughout the post-communist sphere is the rise of right-wing and far right-wing populism and a scaling back of democratic freedoms. But what people saw in Armenia is the opposite, and I think the Armenian Revolution really gave hope to a lot of people because of its rather liberal character. And of course, the revolution is quite interesting because it was very rapid and very peaceful, which was also pretty great to see.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about local media, such as ourselves, were they ready for what came about, and what is going to be their role in ensuring that this transformation stays on the right path?
I think that local media was quite ready. I mean, as the revolution was happening, I could definitely follow everything that happened moment by moment. It was amazing. And I think especially the live streams, the tweets, Yerevan Report, for instance, or I guess EVN Report, did a really great job. And they, I think, really came into their own with this revolution. And I'd like to mention that I think the coverage in Armenia, well, obviously it was happening here, so it was quite good. But the international coverage always seemed to try and play into this like Europe, America versus Putin thing.
The geopolitical politics.
Yeah, which it's just like, oh, is Pashinyan on this side? Are the people on that side? And the reality, of course, was a lot more nuanced than that. And I think the coverage in Armenia captured that very well.
Mm-hmm. There were quite a few articles that came out after that positioning of, you know, geopoliticizing everything. That said, you know, sometimes politics can happen just for the sake of politics. Do you think people have realized that now, or are they still trying to see where Pashinyan fits within the Russia-West framework?
I think in Armenia, people definitely realize that. I think outside of Armenia, a lot of pundits just don't know enough about Armenia. And especially because of Donald Trump and sort of, the specter of Russia, I'm afraid that a lot of them can't think outside of that dichotomy. And I don't really see that changing anytime soon. And to answer a previous question that I didn't answer, you asked how could media sort of continue to be responsible and to have a positive impact. I think that the important thing is that while this revolution has had a lot of positives, it's important for media to keep Nikol Pashinyan accountable, because I think all of us who are happy with this revolution, there's a sort of there's a triumphalism there. It's like, yeah, we want it to succeed and we sort of want to give the benefit of the doubt to the new government. But I think the role of the media, the role of the Fourth Estate is in fact to speak truth to power, even if it's a government that you feel quite good about.
Yeah, so see things how they are, not how we want them
even
to
if
look.
it hurts. Yeah.
Yes. And in the media recently we've seen this sort of reshaping of the image of various government agencies, not just the reshaping of the image, but the agencies themselves. And the most notable and obvious one is the NSS, the National Security Services, where they've sort of transformed from this KGB style information gatherers to modern day anti-corruption heroes. How do we ensure that this doesn't change with the next government and with the next leaders? And is it dangerous that they're so susceptible? And in other words, how do we create good institutions that are holding their own instead of playing to individual interests?
That's a very big question. I'll do my best to try and answer succinctly. I think that the sort of the new popularity of the NSS is understandable. And in fact, the challenges that we're facing Pashinyan, I mean, it's helping him solve these problems, and it's being quite successful in this anti-corruption campaign. The danger with the NSS is that with its rehabilitated public image and it's sort of it being a tool of necessity for Pashinyan means that it can develop a level of power and autonomy that we might not later be happy with. And to the institutions that would have to exist to be able to sort of hold these things in check, I mean, I think you would say that these are the institutions of any healthy democracy. You would need civil society that is not just effervescent, that just appears during a revolution and then sort of stays in the background. You would need permanent, stable institutions that have sort of local democratic power. The best example would be trade unions. And these organizations can keep the government accountable. And moreover, these are the kinds of organizations that historically have sort of been connected to political parties. So the problem in Armenia right now is that there is no opposition to Nikol Pashinyan. And that kind of thing can lead to dictatorship. I mean, it's only him, and he's very closely allied with the NSS. Like, the problem is quite apparent. And what Armenia needs to do to develop into a healthy democracy is to have proper opposition parties. And I think the best outcome would be that perhaps some of the supporters of the Velvet Revolution, who perhaps have thought that Nikol Pashinyan has not gone far enough in certain things, for instance, with the pension reform, they're unhappy with, I guess, the neoliberalism of the revolution. If they were to join up with the new wave of social mobilizations, the strikes and whatnot that have erupted in the wake of the revolution, to basically create a left-wing opposition to the new government, that would ensure the possibility of the transfer of power democratically, and would ensure, I think, the sort of accountability that leads to the building of institutions that function, and would limit something like an overly powerful NSS.
Do you see him going towards that type of institution building? Are we far from that?
I can't say that, I mean, it looks like he's aiming to go for institution building, but I think the bigger question is that can Armenian society, as a society, build these institutions? Because Nikol Pashinyan cannot call into being a democratic opposition for himself. That has to come from society.
Civil society, media.
Exactly, and that's the difficulty. I mean, even the best leader, that's out of his power. This is society itself. And here is, I think, what's key with Pashinyan is that, lately there have been some statements from him, for instance, with the protests going on in Jermuk with regards to the Amulsar mine. And, he's saying, oh, perhaps you're acting as saboteurs of the revolution. And in general, he's been criticizing the ongoing protests after the revolution. I don't think that's right. I think, while I understand where he's coming from, it's like, we need stability, we want to have some space to breathe and to rule. This discourse of calling opposition to oneself basically counter-revolutionary is exactly the kind of thing that eventually leads to a dictatorship. I mean, I think the dangerous parallel we can see here is someone like Saakashvili in Georgia, who of course comes to power very much as a Democrat, and now lives in exile because of abuses of power.
And the protesters are using the same methods that he was preaching, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly the point. And that's where I think you see the democracy of the revolution is not in Nikol Pashinyan. It's in the people and the way that they assert themselves.
I think that's a good ending point. Thank you so much. Thank you for following our conversation, and stay tuned for more.